Can I just say one thing firstly? I love the name Eat Sleep Boxing Repeat.
Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by Paul and Danny. This is the big fight breakdown for the big rematch between Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora on the undercard of Manny Pacquiao and Mario Barrios, taking place on the 19th of July in Las Vegas. Gents, good to be joined by both of you. Maybe a more interesting, appetizing fight than the actual main event on the night, but we're here to discuss it. We all saw what happened to kind of was it a year, over a year ago now in their first fight of the year contender in Las Vegas as well, and a really close fight that went Sebastian Fundora's way. Paul, I'll start with you. I think we've seen Tim Tszyu's kind of gone from being the most feared super welterweight in the world to losing unexpectedly against Fundora and then losing kind of by a pretty brutal stoppage against Murtazaliev in the fight afterwards. Is this a good idea for Tim Tszyu? Is this a good fight? He's had a comeback win since then against Joey Spencer back home in Australia. But yeah, do you think this is a good idea for him to be kind of returning to the top level against a fighter with the caliber of Sebastian Fundora?
I think there's a couple of ways you can look at it. In terms of career management and maybe Tim Tszyu's best interests, I don't particularly think it's a great idea. But in terms of you've lost two of your last three, one of them by a pretty brutal knockout. Yeah, you had that one comeback victory, but against the limited fighter. I mean, you're getting a chance to become world champion again. So you're like, yeah, well, why not? I'll snatch that. Those opportunities don't come around all the time. So I can see it from that point of view. Yes, that it is kind of like a good move to take a world title shot. But then, as I said at the beginning, I think if I was on Tim Tszyu's team and maybe advising him, maybe think this isn't the best move for your career, to be perfectly honest. Don't know if that's a bit harsh or not, but yeah, that's kind of the way I'm looking at it in terms of what he could win almost in not becoming the world champion, getting a victory over Fundora and becoming world champion, then yeah, it's great, but ultimately career interest, best interests at heart, not for me.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's an interesting one and still only 30 years old, Tim Tszyu. So some might say it's maybe needs more of more of a rebuilding job. Danny, what are your thoughts from kind of like a managing a fighter perspective? Do you think this is a good fight for Tim Tszyu to take?
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw this announced. I thought the impression I got was that they were maybe going down the Keith Thurman route. That's why they had Thurman had that fight over in Australia against Brock Jarvis. All the talk before was about a fight between himself and Tim Tszyu, and I think that would have made more sense. Obviously, you take away the WBC world title being on the line for Fundora. I think the Thurman fight makes more sense in pretty much every other way. Thurman, although he looked good against Brock Jarvis, very much on the back nine, and I sort of think Tszyu is as well, to be honest. But it's a winnable fight. It would be a good payday, and maybe build that confidence up. I'm sure the win over Joey Spencer went some inroads into doing that. Although if anyone watched that fight, Joey Spencer barely threw a punch in his corner. Were very quick to throw the towel in. So how much ambition he had, and how much that really tested the resolve of Tszyu after his last two fights, I'm not so sure. I was shocked to see the odds for this, that Tim Tszyu's opened up a favourite. I know we'll come on to predictions, was surprised at that. I think afterwards, a lot of the conversations around Tim Tszyu could be very different. That Murtazaliev fight was brutal. The amount of punishment they took, he probably should have been pulled out of there a bit earlier. Four heavy knockdowns, and I think just to have one sort of three round blowout and then go straight back into. I know it's not the fighter that beat you in that fashion, but the Fundora fight was a brutal fight. Fundora's growing in confidence. You bear in mind he was coming into that Tszyu fight straight after. It was the first fight since he had been brutally knocked out. He's gone on to have an impressive stoppage win since then, so we'll probably see a better, more confident Sebastian Fundora. People talk about how being a world champion, grows their confidence. So, yeah, I was surprised at this, and from a management perspective, yeah, I'm not sure it's the best movie there.
Yeah, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on the situation, but kind of had a really brutal fight against Fundora the first time, which was in March of 2024, and then in October goes against this kind of undefeated Russian who can punch. I would love to know who kind of thought that was a good idea, or if it was an opportunity that they couldn't turn down. But it seemed really strange to me. I don't know if it was bad matchmaking or they were underestimating Murtazaliev. I'm not sure, but here we are, and the Fundora rematch. Fundora rematch is on. Danny, what is with Fundora? He's always a fighter that's interested me purely kind of his physique and the fact he's actually had a lot of success in his career. Just the one loss on his resume against Brian Mendoza. Do you do you consider him to be the best at 154? I mean, I'm not really including Terence Crawford in that because I'm not convinced he's going to fight at 154 again. But when you consider kind of Virgil Ortiz, Murtazaliev, Israel Madrimov, of course, another big name at 154, where does Fundora fit in kind of to your rankings at the top there?
I mean, you have to have him up there. I mean, he was until quite recently a unified world champion. Still got that WBC belt. He's got Tim Tszyu. That win over Tim Tszyu, although the cut played a big part of it, at the time was probably the best win of any super welterweight, considering the run Tszyu was on before then. Got some other good wins, but yeah, it's hard to call anyone in that division at the minute sort of categorically number one. Taking away Terence Crawford, I think Virgil Ortiz got two good wins, very good wins against Boachuk and Madrimov. Really impressive against Madrimov. I mean, all Murtazaliev has really is the win over Tim Tszyu, but you look at the fast he did it in, struggling to get fights off the back of that, seen as a bit of a boogeyman. So it's really hard to pin down a number one. I think one thing about Fundora is he's shaking off this sort of novelty act sort of thing now. People definitely recognize him as a legitimate world level fighter and not just some sort of circus attraction, which I think he was sort of being billed as before then. I think the way he beat Tim Tszyu, he showed a bit more boxing acumen than he has before, because despite his height and his reach and his sort of physical advantages, he's never really used them. He's just sort of, marched forward and almost gave them up. Whereas I'm not saying he ran against Tszyu, but he did box a bit more. So I think, as I say, to call him number one, maybe you could have made more of a case when you got two of the belts. I think it's wide open, that division. But I wouldn't argue too much with anyone who made the case for him.
Yeah, look, it's a funny division, isn't it? There's kind of a big range of fighters, and yeah, we don't, as I sort of said, we don't know kind of what Terence Crawford's plans are. But yeah, there's a lot of good fights in the division. Paul, where's your head at with Fundora? He's a legitimate world champion. See some good wins on his resume. Going back in there against Tim Tszyu, how highly do you rank Fundora?
Yeah, I don't know if I have him number one, but he's definitely I think you can conclusively say he's your top five. Like if you, especially given that you have one of the belts, I mean, you could probably say he's top three. But just those names that, without kind of going over all ground of what you and yourself and Danny have already said, yeah, Crawford aside, you've got Virgil Ortiz looked really, really good last time in particular against Madrimov. I thought so. Even despite not having a belt, really, like you're throwing him right up there as one of the best. Yeah, Murtazaliev, maybe not the best resume overall, but then conclusive last victory, as you said, against Tim Tszyu. Yeah, you kind of, do you still have Madrimov up there? Yes, you probably have him up near the top. You still probably have Boachuk up near the top. Xander Zayas coming through. I don't know, not ahead of some Fundora yet, but could he be better than him? Potentially, he's still only a young man. So you definitely have Fundora. I definitely have him top five, probably around maybe number three at the minute. But I don't think I can conclusively say that he's my outright number one at 154 just yet. But that could change if he, comes unified champion again and beats the likes of a Virgil Ortiz or Murtazaliev in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, no, we'll see. It's interesting. I'm hoping it's a division that kind of maybe makes more sense this time next year, and we're a bit more confident in saying who we kind of think who we think's top five or top 10. But yeah, of course, what can change is people changing weight divisions. That brings me on nicely to kind of next question. Could both of these men win world titles at middleweight? The reason I'm asking this, chaps, is that both men have been at this same weight for 8-9 years now. Fundora obviously has got that interesting physique when he's kind of very tall, so you do question how much longer he can stay at super welterweight. And yeah, Tim Tszyu, 30 years old now, so you do question how much longer he'll be at 154 pounds, having been at the weight division for so long. At the same time, middleweight division's weak at the moment, to be polite. You've got champions who are kind of inactive, champions who maybe some people aren't too keen on fighting. So yeah, Paul, against the likes of kind of Carlos Adames, Erislandy Lara, could both of these guys move up to middleweight in the next 12 months and win a world title, in your opinion?
Think of the two, Fundora is more likely, just as you said, given the attributes that he has physically, the height, the reach, and so on. You'd think that the transition, if he was to do it up to 160, would be fairly smooth and fairly easy for him. You look at Erislandy Lara, he's quite an old champion. Would I be I don't know whether I'd be 100% confident, but I'd be confident enough that Fundora could probably beat him, to be honest. Tim Zhu, I can't sit here and say with confidence that he becomes world champion at middleweight, to be honest, just based off that Murtazaliev defeat. Depends on what happens here, I suppose, in the rematch with Fundora, like and how he looks. But right here, right now, I'm saying no for Tim Zhu becoming world champion at 160. Far more of a chance for Fundora. The Adames fight, I mean, yeah, still don't know just how good Adames is, maybe. After that Shiraz fight, because it was a bit of an odd one. Whether Shiraz did have a hand injury or so on and so on and so forth. But he did look good, I suppose, to a certain degree. And then you look at like, Janabek. I mean, I don't think, yeah, he nobody wants to fight him really. So I'd probably make Janabek the favorite there. But yeah, I certainly think Fundora could win a version of a world title at 160, but probably a no for me for Tim Zhu.
Danny, do you agree or disagree with Paul? It says Fundora could win a world title, but Tim Tszyu not so much. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I more or less agree with everything Paul said there. I think neither of them have got anything to trouble Janabek with, just to put that to bed nice and early. Lara would be the one I would fancy Fundora against, just because of the freshness, the youth, the amount of punches he throws. Lara's still good. I mean, he's still dangerous early in fights. He had a couple of early stoppages. I think it was Michael Zarafa. I think he stopped pretty early, and he either seems to stop people in one or two rounds or sort of box their decision. But I think the freshness, the amount of punches Fundora lands, obviously the height, it would be hard for him to land that sort of southpaw left. So it'd make Fundora a favourite there. But Tszyu, I could just see walking on to one. And I've got real concerns about his punch resistance, not just off that Murtazaliev fight. Tszyu's been down before. He was down, I think, in his like sixth or seventh professional fight for like an Australian domestic title, down heavy against a guy who did not have an impressive knockout percentage. Was down early heavy against Terrell Gosia as well. So I know he's had a reputation, has always been tough, and he is tough, but I just don't think that durability is quite what it's been made out to be. And whatever that's going to be like after what Murtazaliev have done to him, I think anyone who's a sort of sharp counter puncher is a nightmare for him. Adames, I think, is good. I think Adames Fundora's a 50-50 fight. I think that's a really entertaining fight. It was to happen actually. Again, maybe a slightly better style for Tszyu, but you'd have to make, for me anyway, Adames the favourite, because I think that move up in weight would the power that Tszyu's got be affected somewhat? You would probably think so. So yeah, just really, in long story short, would agree with Paul that Fundora, I would say, more likely to have success at 160 than Tim Tszyu.
Thank you. But before we move on to final predictions, I do want to ask you, Danny, what happened with Tim Tszyu? Did you think he was overhyped? Because he was being billed as the best in the division, bit of a monster, was kind of winning a lot of his fights quite convincingly, was widely expected to beat Fundora the first time. Was it just a case of kind of the cut happened, lost the fight, and then they went into the worst possible fight next, and now he's not the same fighter? Or do you think maybe people went a bit over the top when promoting him, basically?
I would say closer to the first explanation you give, because that run he was on, I mean, he went on that run, like those were good fighters, and he was dealing with them in good fashion. Mendoza beat in good fashion, destroyed Carlos Campos, even coming up, comfortably beating the likes of Dennis Hogan, Takuma Inoue, probably loads of names we're forgetting as well. But I think he's always had flaws. He's never had much of a defence. Tim Tszyu does not move his head at all. He's got a pretty open guard. But I just think he's never really ran into like a sort of one punch knockout artist, a sort of good counter puncher, someone who can walk him onto a shot. Had that Fundora fight, and I think some of the narratives around that Fundora fight, it was like, oh, Tszyu was battering him before it, and then he had the cut. I mean, Tszyu was getting on top, but it was 2 rounds. He maybe slightly buzzed Fundora once or twice, but then obviously the cut happened and he took a lot of punishment in the second half of that fight. I mean, he couldn't see. I mean, Corner really should have pulled him out when they could have got it done as a no contest or a technical draw. So I think that's probably taken a bit out of him. But I think Murtazaliev would have always been all wrong for him. I think they definitely underestimated Murtazaliev. I think the way Tszyu was speaking in the build-up to that fight was sort of indicative that him and the team were overlooking him. And I think that was probably down to, he had a fight with Jack Kolke, who was like 40-odd and sort of had a bit of success against him, didn't stop until the 11th round. But that was during Ramadan, and even in the build-up to the Tszyu fight, Murtazaliev was said, look, I was drained, I wasn't eating, I wasn't fueling, like, wait till you see what I do this time. And he backed it up. So I think, in answer to your question, I think Tszyu's always had flaws. Doesn't mean he wasn't a world-class 154, still is a world-class 154, but once he's ran into a fighter with the attributes to exploit him, that was always going to happen. And I just don't think you can be the same. How can any fighter be the same after what Murtazaliev done to him? I don't think there's any fighter who's ever like looked better after something like that's happened to them.
Shows you how brutal the sport can be when you kind of, it feels like a bit of a, I don't want to say hero to zero situation, but hero to not hero, basically. It feels like that's happened with Tszyu. All right, chaps, quick fire predictions to end the video, please. Paul, I'll go to you first. Tszyu, a slight favourite in this fight, which Danny mentioned earlier. What's your prediction for this one, please?
Yeah, I think it's probably fairly obvious what way I'm going based off what I've said earlier. I think Fundora gets this done again for the second time. However, I'm actually backing him to win this via stoppage this time. I think he's recovered really well since that fairly brutal Mendoza stoppage, and he's looked good, and he's clearly a big puncher. And I think Tszyu, as Danny's kind of said, is maybe shadow of himself even from like 12 months ago. So yeah, I'm going with Sebastian Fundora to win this fight via stoppage in the mid to late rounds.
Right, Danny, hand things over to you. What's your prediction here?
Yeah, I've been mulling this over because I don't think Fundora is a one-punch knockout artist. I think although he's got a good knockout percentage, it's more through volume. So I'm sort of torn between, I do think he'll win, whether it be points or a stoppage. Although I do think we'll see a more aggressive Fundora than we saw first time, a more confident Fundora. I think he'll look at what he's done since that fight. He'll look at Tszyu's lost to Murtazaliev and think, you're ready to go here if I catch you. So I'm going to agree with Paul. I think he'll stop him somewhere around 9-10 rounds.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. I just think I hate saying this because like he's only 30. He's just lost a couple of fights, but it's just be interesting to see where Tszyu's at in terms of his punch resistance, confidence, how much he wants to be in there. How both fighters are making the weight as well was interesting. I will go Fundora to win this fight on point. In an entertaining fight. Camera's gone off and now it's back on. Sorry about that. We'll end the video there. Danny, Paul, thank you both very much. We'll speak to you again soon.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.